Okay, so this is a video on Obama's speech, which is the last speech in the booklet, so towards the back of the booklet. So in terms of context, obviously, hopefully you know that Barack Obama was the president before Trump. This is the 21st of January 2013, which is actually his second term as president. So in America, you can be president twice and for 2 terms only. Before having to give up the presidency. So this is his second term as being president. So you still do an inaugural address. So inaugural just means like the first. So your first address as president for his second term. Okay, so few things that I want to talk about is when he starts his speech. So his speech is to a very public audience. So it is meant to be so that the whole of the nation hear it, and it's something that the media as well as the public take a great interest in. Even here, we take a great interest in the inaugural addresses of presidents in modern times especially. Okay, so what's important in this first stanza here is that he's constantly using the word we. Okay, so we gather, we bear witness, we affirm, we recall. So he's using lots of verbs as well as inclusive language. Okay, so in this he's talking about how he is the same as his audience and that this is what Americans always do. Really interestingly, in this line here, we recall that what binds this nation together is not the colours of our skin or the tenets of our faith or the origins of our name. So I would say that's probably a reference to when people were questioning whether Obama was actually American, and there was a lot of media speculation surrounding that. So I would say that's sort of a little bit of a reference or a dig at that. So the origins of his name being Obama. What makes us exceptional, what makes us American, okay? So here we've got lots of inclusive language here, and he's appealing to pathos, I suppose, because he's appealing to the audience to make them have that sense of pride in being American and what it means to be American. And then really importantly, he makes a reference to this here. So you see in the inverted commas, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, blah, 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 which is obviously a reference to the Declaration of Independence, which is something that Americans pride themselves on and something that is constantly referred to. And you'll notice that throughout this speech, there's lots of referring back to the values that the Declaration of Independence holds in terms of Americans and also in terms of what Obama wants to achieve for his audience. So today we continue a never-ending journey. So journey is a really important word here because it's showing that Obama is saying that we're not at an end point, we've still got work to do, but we've come a long way. And that his inauguration, his second inauguration speech, is just another point on that journey of making America this fantastic country and making America look at their past, but also look towards their future as well and what that means. So here it says, for history tells us that while these truths have been self-evident, they've never been self-executing. So here, this self-evident is a reference up to these truths here, so that the truth that all men are created equal. But what Obama's saying is making reference to that. He's saying it's fine for that to be true, but we need to do something about it, okay? They don't execute themselves. The people need to make sure that those are executed and that those values are abided by. And again, he repeats is that while freedom is a gift from God, it must be secured by his people here on earth. Okay, so that idea that the average person needs to make sure that those values that are in the Constitution are being upheld all the time. So Patriots of 1776. So 1776 is when the Declaration of Independence happened. Did not replace the tyranny of a king. So that's about getting rid of England, so overthrowing the monarchy and becoming a republic, becoming an independent state with the privileges of a few or the rule of a mob. Okay, so he's talking about here how there's no point in replacing one ruling thing with another ruling thing, that it has to be about everyone having a fair say. Also, what's really important in this is this word here, creed, because Obama refers to it at several points throughout his speech. So creed just means basically like a foundation of beliefs. So it's what you fundamentally stand for. He then moves on to say, and for more than 200 years we have. Okay, so this is showing his audience, getting his audience on side to say, you know, that as Americans, we've been really good at doing this. And then he's probably going to talk about what we now need to do. We've been really good at it, but we need to keep going, and there's things that we need to focus on now. On the rest of this page, you'll notice that Obama's doing a lot of things to unify his audience and to sort of put himself on the same level as his audience and not make him seem like he's better than anyone, or that the president's better than anyone. So he talks about all these things that the Americans have done together. So we made ourselves anew and we vowed to move forward together. Okay, so they're doing all these things as one, as an American people. You've got anaphora here. So together we did this. Okay, so this happens three times. So he's not saying the people who make the rules did this or the president did this. He's saying the American people did this. And that's really important in terms of what it means to be American. That idea of everyone abiding by these rules of equality or guidelines of equality and freedom and liberty. I think he says liberty and equality, yeah. Okay, so another really important thing is he talks about down the bottom here, our celebration of initiative and enterprise, our insistence on hard work and personal responsibility. These are constants in our character. So he's listing all those things that it means to be American, and for Americans to feel a sense of pride in all of those things. I'm just going to move on to the next page, but before I do that, I just want to mention that you probably heard Mr. Conway talking about how it would be a really good idea, or it works really well, to talk about Kennedy's speech and Obama's speech together, because there's a lot of similarities between them. So when you're listening to this analysis, just think about how you could possibly use Kennedy's speech and making connections between the two of them. Okay, so in up on this page, Obama talked about that idea of working together and how things in the past have always worked really well. He then starts with like a interjection to sort of change the route that the speech is going, I suppose. So, but we've always understood that when times change, so must we. So he's talking about how the world is changing, so America needs to change, okay, and that they need to use those principles that they always had in the Declaration of Independence, but they need to adapt them for the modern world. And in here he talks about, for the American people can no more meet the demands of today's world by acting alone than American soldiers, etc., etc. So this is really interesting because America have had a history of being an isolationist country. So prior to World War I, they were quite an isolationist country, which meant that they were concerned about America. And that's part of the reason they became such a powerful nation, I suppose. But in here you've got Obama saying that, like, they can't act alone, okay? So that means that they can't act without the rest of the world, but it also means that individuals in America can't act without the rest of America. And I suppose this is very different, or it's completely opposite to the lines that Trump is using currently, where he's much more isolationist and much less open to outside influences, and that's just in a really short space of time. So, and then he says we must do these things together. So you've got lots of high modality language here. So it's a real call to action as one nation and one people. So that idea that everyone is on the same page. And then he goes on to talk about how, the world has changed a lot, but America is in a really good place because they have youth and drive. So he lists things. So youth and drive, diversity and openness, an endless capacity for risk, and a gift for reinvention. So he's showing here that America has all of these things that are going to help them in the future. Okay, and then again he says, "My fellow Americans," and Kennedy says that. It's a very American thing to say in terms of getting his audience on side. We are made for this moment and we will seize it so long as we seize it together. So again, you've got inclusive language, you've got high modality language, we will seize it. But there's a little asterisk next to it, so long as we seize it together. So he's saying that we all need to work together. Okay, so he's trying to unify his audience because obviously after a president's election, there's always going to be people who didn't vote for that president. But he's talking about that idea of unity. Okay, so in this next part of the speech, Obama does something that's very clever, I think, and it sort of changes the tact, and he uses an AFRA where he says, "For we the people," and then down here he says, "we the people," and on the next page he says, "we the people" as well. So why I think this is really clever, it is inclusive language, but when he uses the people, he's including himself in that. So he has this real egalitarian approach to it. The president is no better than anyone else. And he's saying that everyone knows this. The president knows this. You that are listening to me know this. We all know these things, that these things need to happen. And then he goes on to list them, okay? So he talks about this idea of like the country not being successful if a shrinking few do very well and the growing many barely make it. So that idea of like the rich being rich and the poor being poor. So he's saying that doesn't work, and we all know that. What else is he saying? That the idea that every person can find independence. So again, appeal to pathos, independence and pride in their work. And then down here where it says a little, we are true to our creed. So again, we've got this idea of belief. When a little girl born into the bleakest poverty knows she has the same chance to succeed as anyone else because she is an American. Okay, so appealing to pathos there, that sense of emotion and pride that the audience feel in the idea of being American. And then he goes on to list what it means to be American. She is free and she is equal, not just in the eyes of God, but also in our own. So also because every American understands that freedom is something that they value. In the next stanza, he goes on to talk about other things that Americans know that have to happen, so we understand. Okay, so he uses those verbs, and he talks about the things that need to change. So remaking our government, revamping our tax code, reforming our schools. So lots of things that probably haven't been working very well before. That they're important. And he says, this is what will give real meaning to our creed. So it's that idea of the self-execution, that the belief is there, that self-evident belief that people are created equal. But if there's no self-execution in doing all of these things, then the creed, the Declaration of Independence is essentially useless. Okay, so that's almost the end of this video. So I'm going to make another part 2 for Obama. Which shouldn't be as long as this one. So make sure you watch this one first and then part 2. Thanks.